believers, Pastor Stephen here from Guilford Park Presbyterian Church, hoping you and those you love are doing well this week. We invite you to join us for worship this Sunday at 10 a.m., which will be our second week in our current sermon series, which is called Cues from the Pews, where I've asked you all to give me suggestions of things that you would like to hear me address from the pulpit. Last week was our first week, and we talked about what is a Christian response when we don't feel enough, or when we engage in comparison with ourselves and with our neighbors. And this week we are talking about another emotion. We're going to talk about hate and what is a Christian response to hate when others are hating, but really more importantly, when we ourselves are feeling hatred towards another human being. In fact, this suggestion comes from one of our youngest members. I don't know who they are because these suggestions were anonymous, but one of our younger members said, I would like to hear the pastor speak on what do I do when I feel true, deep-seated hatred. This is how they worded it: true, deep-seated hatred towards another person and struggle to feel even the smallest amount of love towards that person. I applaud the honesty of that question because honestly, who among us does not know what it's like to struggle with that? So we're going to talk about how what do we do with the emotion of hate, and how do we, what is a Christ-like response to that? And we'll walk through two scriptures that will be conversation partners. One will be Genesis chapter 4, which is the story of Cain and Abel. And then the second passage will be the 4th chapter of the book of Ephesians, where Paul is counseling an early Christian community on how to live peaceably amongst one another in the midst of conflict. So that will be two of our conversation partners. We'll talk about Brene Brown again. I know many of y'all have reached out and said that you loved the Brene Brown references that I made in my last sermon, so she will come up again in this sermon. So we invite you to join us this Sunday for that. And another thing we have coming up this week is our fellowship committee and I have been talking about starting just a very casual gathering just to talk about theology. It's going to be called Theology on Tap because we're going to have it at various breweries around the city of Greensboro. And our first Theology on Tap is going to be this upcoming Wednesday, June 14th at 6:30 p.m. at South End Brewing Company in downtown. And while you don't have to read the book that we'll be using, it might be helpful if you would like to. We're going to be using a classic book called Christian Doctrine by Shirley Guthrie. Now, don't let the title intimidate you. Christian Doctrine, this book on Reformed theology, was not written for academia or seminaries, even though it's used in academia and seminaries. This book was originally written for an adult Sunday school curriculum back in the 90s, and it is just a really wonderful, accessible resource to talk about theology from a Reformed perspective. So while, again, you don't have to read it, if you just want to come along for the conversation, we trust that you'll find that stimulating nevertheless. But if you would like to dive a little bit deeper and to prepare for it, then you can purchase this book on Amazon.com, anywhere you want to. I also think we have at least 1 or 2 copies in our church library here if you want to check it out and borrow it. So again, our first Theology on Tap is going to be this upcoming Wednesday, June 14th at 6:30 p.m. at South End Brewing Company. So hope you'll join us for that and this upcoming Sunday at 10 a.m. for worship. Remember, friends, there is room for you in the neighborhood. So until we see each other, be well, take care,